Welcome to Three Beers IT, a home for disinhibited conversations about the world of IT. The things that maybe don't get said until folks are on their third beer, or equivalent. And, as always, Three Beers IT urges listeners of legal drinking age to drink responsibly and to not spill. It shorts out the equipment and stinks up the HVAC. Today we're talking about quantum, specifically quantum cryptography. Is this a brave new world? Is this nothing very important? Or is it both? I'm John Burke, CTO at Nemertes, 16 years an analyst here, and before that, 18 years an IT guy who did everything from writing software to managing network and data center teams to enterprise architecture. Joining me today is some beer. Today's beer is Surly's Furious IPA, a fantastic local beer from here in Minneapolis. Oh, and also a human. Hi. Joining me today is also former CIO of SUNY at Old Westbury and chair of the Council of SUNY CIOs, Marc Seybold. Care to introduce yourself or your drink any further?
Nope, but this is water, not vodka, just for the people that are curious.
Yes, I understand you're microdosing your alcohol these days, so sometime we'll do a whole session on that. But I'm going to continue macrodosing, and let's talk about quantum cryptography. It's rapidly becoming as hot as Charles Strauss would say, a very hot thing indeed. But should it be something that I, as a hypothetical IT guy in the enterprise, worry about now if I am a typical person? Or should I plan on being worried about it? What even actually is quantum cryptography? So let's start with that last one. What actually is quantum cryptography?
That's a good question because most people make the assumption that it's actually about cryptographic algorithms, which is something separate. That's post-quantum or quantum-resistant algorithms. Quantum cryptography is actually about quantum key distribution, which is a way of creating extremely difficult to crack random keys because it relies on a quantum phenomena, either a free space laser or a fiber optic connection between 2 points, so that the key exchange itself is eavesdrop proof. If somebody does eavesdrop on you, you're going to be able to detect it. So the keys themselves, it's an open question whether they're any better than the keys that are being generated right now. The real value of the system is that if you're in a situation where you need to know absolutely whether or not somebody is eavesdropping on that exchange, is the quantum key distribution. Now, is that something that you need to worry about if you're outside of government or maybe certain financial institutions, certainly the military? Local question. I mean, it's a complicated thing to set up. It's got serious distance limitations unless you're talking about a ground station to a satellite, in which case both the Chinese and the Europeans have demonstrated publicly active links that work. We've probably done it privately, but it hasn't been mentioned in the States. And by private, that means the government or the military, some service arm,
Right.
somebody like that. Is that something most people should be worried about? No. Post-quantum cryptography, totally different story. That people should start to be worried about. So in the United States, the standards are being set up by NIST for that, so National Institutes of Standards. And they've gone through a multi-year, multi-phase process, and they're just about finished. The work had been split into 3 different phases, and 2 of them are complete, and the last one's expected to be complete before the year is out. But the work has been very public, so everybody knows what the first 2 pieces are, and there are implementations out there. And everybody knows what the algorithms are that they're looking at for the last 2 pieces as well. And in fact, Amazon Web Services is now testing with select clients quantum proof cryptography at the TLS level between fixed sites and their cloud. So absolutely, that's something that people should be worried about. It's also common knowledge at this point that state actors, basically the Chinese and the Russians, are grabbing everything they can and archiving it in hopes of being able to decrypt that data down the road. And so
Wait. We got to pause on that one and just double underline it. In some ways, what you're just saying is it's already far too late to secure things that have been conventionally encrypted and are sitting out there in any accessible space.
if you know that they've been compromised in the sense that they've been downloaded by pretty much anybody at this point, because the common criminals can steal the data and then turn around and sell it just like they sell the credit card information. So it
Right.
doesn't necessarily have to be a state actor that's stolen the data. But yes, if you've got things that are encrypted in conventional cryptographic algorithms, the current public standards, then that data, it's only a matter of time before it's going to be possible to decrypt it. And I want to say now, somewhere in the last 6 or 7 months or so, there was an academic paper published where somebody finally put a time frame on how long it would take to do this if you had a working quantum computer. So they assumed 2,000 qubits, and to crack the current cryptographic standards would take about 177 days. But that's certainly a stake in the ground. And since the publicly disclosed number of qubits are 256, that was done by the Chinese about 2 or 3 months back, just in the same week that IBM disclosed they had 126 working qubits. And IEEE Spectrum had an interview with a top American academic specialist in quantum computing, and he was very impressed by the Chinese number. When he'd looked at it, it was a real 256 error-corrected qubits. So if that's the public number, the real number is higher. Is it twice that? Is it 1.5 times that? No way to know. One of the biggest problems is almost all of the publicly available explanations for quantum computing, I don't quite want to say smoke and mirrors, but they invoke a lot of mysticism. And so it's
A
very,
lot of hand wave. Yep.
exactly. So it's not at all clear to even the average technologist what's really happening and how these things work. So it's definitely worth a 10 or 15 minute future three beers to go over that and try and
Absolutely.
get something that's understandable.
I think that's a tremendous idea. Even just getting down to the fundamental difference between what general purpose quantum computing, which is where you focus, or where most people focus their conversation, and what do they call them? Quantum annealing solvers that work by a very different mechanism and are not general purpose. They can pretty much only do one category of problem, but they can do that very flexibly.
Yeah, that's the famous 3D, what is it, D-Wave machine.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they are out there actually being used to solve industrial problems now. But back to quantum cryptography, and I want to just recap some of the key points I think you've made in passing here. Is it actually using quantum technology to encrypt or decrypt things? No. Is it actually using quantum to distribute the keys? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depends on the offer, and you've got to look very carefully. Is it actually using quantum to generate keys? Yes. Does that make the cryptography better? Maybe. Have I got the summary right so far?
Prefacing that with quantum key distribution, because in the marketing literature, quantum key distribution and quantum cryptography are used interchangeably. So when you
Exactly.
hear quantum cryptography, instead of thinking post-quantum or quantum resistant cryptographic algorithms,
Or
simply
using quantum to do cryptography. Yeah.
do a mental substitution and drop in quantum key distribution. And
Yep.
that kind of blows away some of the architecture that's around there. And the interesting thing about it is when you look at the diagrams for how these things are created, the most quantum part of it is actually in the transmission of the photons from one end to the other. And the reason it's called quantum is because if you try and eavesdrop on that link, you'll disturb the quantum state of those photons, and that will be detectable by the people on the receiving end of it. But the actual equipment that's used to generate the keys themselves don't have to be quantum. Basically, you need something that's going to emit single photons at a time. Then you've got to have some random number generator which will flip a polarizer between one state and another, and then similar equipment at the receiving end. But the really quantum part of it is the transmission of those photons between the two sites, and the fact that photons are used because they're encoding quantum information. And it's by disturbing them that you're going to be able to tell whether or not the link was compromised. But there's no actual need to have quantum hardware outside of that. You could have a quantum number generator as part of that, but it's not an a priori requirement.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I see that we're rapidly approaching what cognitive science tells us is the optimal chunk size for this kind of material. So I'll ask you if you have any closing thought before we wrap up this session of Three Beers.
Quantum key distribution, you really need to analyze whether or not there's a value add on that. And basically, that's whether or not you need to be able to detect a compromise in the way the key is distributed. Because if the keys are simply being created using quantum key distribution, but then once they're created, they're passed on to an end client station via conventional means, what's the difference then? Where's the value add that's coming into that? It's just not super obvious. On the other hand, the post-quantum or quantum resistant algorithms are a totally different story. People should absolutely be looking into that. And for the most part, it means going to your existing vendors. It's unlikely you're going to be needing to add anything because they're algorithms. They're not actually hardware.
Exactly. There's nothing quantum about the algorithms or the hardware that you use to execute them. That's all traditional, conventional hardware and software. But it can give you some defense against future quantum computer attacks on your encrypted materials.
Exactly.
So that's the place to focus.
They're theoretically proof against quantum computers, because right now the big problem is quantum computers are theorized to be able to, using a thing called Shor's algorithm, to break the basically factor very large numbers and be able to work backwards from that. And that's where that 177 days and 2,000 qubits came from.
Right, exactly.
The post-quantum, quantum-resistant ones, even if you have quantum computers, you still won't be able to break them.
So that's something to think about. That's something to focus on. And the rest of it, mostly watch and wait kind of material. Well, thank you, Marc, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. And thanks, everybody, for giving us your attention. And until next time, I'm John Burke from Nemertes Research, and this is Three Beers IT. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, John. Have a good day, everybody.